Hello and welcome back to Hope After. This is a podcast for couples navigating the impact of pornography on their marriage. And today we're turning towards something that doesn't get enough airtime in recovery. What happens after the intensity fades? Now, the crisis stage eventually settles, the long conversations become less frequent, and life begins to feel more normal. And then, unexpectedly, something stirs: a stressful week, a passing comment, a memory you thought had lost its edge. In those moments, many couples quietly wonder, is this normal or are we sliding backwards? This episode is here to steady you, not by minimising what resurfaces and not by sounding alarm bells, but by telling the truth about what sustainable healing actually looks like over time. Understanding recovery is one thing, living it in ordinary life is another, and that difference matters more than most couples realise. Now, when old feelings resurface, there's often a surprise when that reaction appears months, sometimes years after significant progress. Your body that had relaxed suddenly tightens, a conversation feels sharper than expected, a wave of anxiety arrives without warning. It can feel deeply unsettling. But resurfacing emotion does not mean healing has undone itself. It means your nervous system remembers what it once learned, and it's responding to something that resembles threat, even if the present moment is different. Memory lives in the body. Growth changes how we respond to that memory. Long-term recovery isn't about preventing every reaction. It's about knowing what to do when one arrives. Now, here's a word that didn't exist 10 years ago: triggers. Triggers often feel like alarms, and for many women especially, they carry the message something isn't safe again. That fear makes sense. Yet a trigger is not evidence that you're back at the beginning. It's evidence that your body once experienced a rupture and learned to protect you. Time alone doesn't erase protective wiring. What changes is the environment around it. Within the program, we often describe triggers as information rather than an instruction. They reveal something that needs attention. They don't automatically demand panic. Responding wisely does take practice. It also takes structure. Left uncontained, triggers can spiral. Held within clarity and support, they become moments of reinforcement rather than collapse. Now, there was a moment when something small stirred an unexpectedly strong reaction in me, and I remember saying quietly, I don't want to overreact, but this has unsettled me. And even naming it felt risky. Part of me feared that raising it would suggest we were regressing. From the other side, there was confusion at first. The assumption had been that this territory was fully behind us. What shifted that conversation wasn't defensiveness, it was understanding that healing doesn't delete memory, it reshapes response. The reaction itself was not the danger. Isolation would have been. Instead of arguing about whether the trigger was justified, we stayed with what it revealed, the information. And that steadiness didn't happen accidentally. It was built through ongoing support and repeated practice in earlier stages. And moments like that are where long-term recovery either strengthens or fractures. Now, the difference between a setback and a collapse is this. In sustained recovery, pressure will return. That's not a sign of failure, it's a sign of life. A setback might look like noticing old urges for the man, feeling emotionally flooded for the woman, or becoming aware of stress patterns that once led somewhere unhealthy. Collapse, however, follows a different path. Collapse begins when honesty fades, when structure loosens quietly, and when isolation creeps back in. The distinction matters. Many couples assume that because they feel stronger, they no longer need accountability or structure. That assumption often surfaces just as life increases its demands. Maintenance is less dramatic than crisis recovery. It's also more important. Structure that felt essential early on can begin to feel excessive later, but removing it too soon often exposes foundations that are still settling. Sustainable healing requires continued intention long after urgency has faded. And that's why Jez and I, we take ourselves through our own course every 3 to 6 months. In early recovery, urgency drives change. There is motivation, focus, and vigilance. As stability grows, comfort returns. That comfort can quietly invite complacency. Check-ins become less frequent. Boundaries feel negotiable. Conversations shorten and assumptions grow. None of these shifts feel dramatic. That's precisely why they're subtle risks. Healing does not sustain itself on good intentions. It rests inside a container, rhythms, accountability, clarity about what to do when pressure rises. This is one reason many couples remain connected to a structured support longer than they intentionally expected. Not because they're failing, but because they recognize that steady growth thrives when it is held. Now, faith, perseverance, and real life. I just want to touch on this because for couples of faith, long-term recovery can carry another layer of misunderstanding. There can be an assumption that once something is healed, it should never resurface, and Scripture paints a more realistic picture. The language of perseverance, vigilance, endurance, and humility appears repeatedly, not because transformation is fragile, but because life remains complex. Faith does not eliminate the need for wisdom, it deepens it. Grace does not remove accountability, it invites humility. Spiritual maturity includes recognizing that ongoing structure is not a sign of weak faith. It's a sign of realistic stewardship. So, what does long-term recovery actually look like? Well, sustainable recovery rarely looks dramatic. It shows up in noticing stress earlier than before. It appears in choosing conversation rather than withdrawal. It surfaces in quicker returns to honesty after tension. Calm seasons are no longer seen as permission to disengage. Instead, they become opportunities to reinforce connection. Patterns change slowly, then quietly stabilize. And many couples reach this stage and realize something unexpected. The real work began after the crisis. Early stages were about stopping harm. This stage is about building resilience, and resilience grows best when it's supported, not improvised. There is a temptation to treat recovery like a project with an end date. Once insight has been gained and behaviour has shifted, it can feel unnecessary to remain engaged in structured support. Yet, most couples find that without reinforcement, blind spots return gradually. Life pressures intensify and old habits whisper subtly rather than loudly. So needing continued support doesn't signal weakness, it signals wisdom. The Hope After program was designed not only for crisis repair, but mainly for long-term stability. Many couples start the Hope After program because something was broken. But we find that many couples repeat the program again and again because they recognize the value of it as life continues, because sustainable healing is rarely maintained in isolation or as a one-off, tick the box, it's done. So if you're listening and recognizing yourselves navigating, resurfacing triggers or managing new seasons of stress and wondering how to protect what you've rebuilt, this is where structured support becomes invaluable. And the podcast provides some language. The program itself provides lived structure. Inside the course, you will receive guidance for responding to triggers without panic, clarity around setbacks without re-trauma, and frameworks for maintaining honesty long after crisis has passed. Many couples begin thinking they need help surviving something painful. But if long-term steadiness rather than short-term relief is what you're after, then enrolment details are in the show notes. There's no urgency, but there is wisdom in not waiting for crisis to return before strengthening what has been built. Real healing is not measured by the absence of triggers. It's revealed in the way you respond when they arise. Long-term recovery is not about perfection. It's about remaining anchored to truth, accountability, and connection, especially when life grows demanding. Support doesn't signal failure, it strengthens endurance. Now, in the final episode of this series, we will speak about hope, not sentimental optimism, but the durable kind that sustains over years. For now, let setbacks offer information rather than identity. Let structure remain your ally rather than your emergency plan. And remember, healing that lasts is healing that is held.